Welcome back to another edition of Truth Seekers. Today we have our guest David, along with Coach Nick and myself, Coach Josh. Today's topic is communication, internal communication, external communication. What does effective communication look like? Why is it important? These are all things we'll be talking to our guest David about today. So David, if I can pose this first question to you, what does effective communication look like? And I'm going to ask you to kind of use your wherever you want to take this, because you can go internal, external, but what does effective communication mean to you?
The first thing that comes to mind is clear and simple. It's clear, it's simple. I feel like a lot of communication, speaking these from the business side of things, is white noise. And a lot of people, I'm not, how many times have you driven by a billboard and you're like, I have no idea what that is about? Like here's a cool logo and maybe it has a picture of a family. I don't know anything, but you're like, I still have no clue what you're doing. So for me, clear, concise, simple is always better. And sometimes shorter is better versus the 20-page version of it.
So it has to do with the reaction that you get from people, right? Is that fair to say? So what you're communicating has to be effective in a way that gets to them so that they can understand it. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of times things are over communicated. So for, obviously there's depends on what we're talking about in terms of marketing. Sometimes you have to tell somebody something 20 times before in their brain they register it for the second or third time. But I think general communicating in terms of one-on-one, a lot of times simple is just better because nobody wants to, at least you can tell by now, I can rant for a while. So it's not fun for those that are listening sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting dynamic there with, like, if we talk about the internal voice in our head, we have so many ideas, we have so many directions that we can take things, we have so many ways to express what we're thinking, that we want to, like, part of making it effective is to understand what would best resonate with the other person. Coach, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, because whether that is a billboard or just one-on-one communication, you can communicate what you think is effective, and then, like, the other person could be totally lost. So it's kind of like at least a two-person game. Is that fair, Coach?
Yeah. Well, I just think communication is just such an important thing. I think it's really everything. And I love what you said, Dave, because it's like simple and clear. And that intellectually, that makes sense. Like, I want it to be as clear and simple as possible. I sometimes think, especially in a corporate perspective, but a business perspective overall, we tend to think that simple is stupid. It's like, I don't want to be simple because I want to come across as smart. So I want to make it more, add it some more depth and add some extra words in. But something we practice at Pro Advisor is simplistic complexity. It's just trying to make things as simple as possible because people can hear them there. So I think it's just so important, because something could be so clear to you in your mind and you're communicating it, but if it's not clear to the other person, it means nothing. It's not clear. And having that dialogue is so important. That's why communication is about the back and forth, not just about the out. And so I think that really comes back to what I'm thinking. My mind's going is, well, it's really about communication. Is really about listening, rather than saying. It's like the Stephen Covey's, one of his 7 habits was seek first to understand before being understood. So I think that it comes down to that, being able to not only communicate, just say what you're going to say, but make sure that you heard first. So there's an opportunity to understand and flex what you were going to say, or say something new to actually be impactful. There's so much to this, isn't there?
There is. And I think one thing I want to add is that knowing how you want to communicate in terms of knowing yourself. For example, when I communicate, I love person to person, face to face. I'm not a big texter, emailer. Of course, that's needed in today's world,
Right.
Or some people love it the other way around. They rather email or text or do other things. And a lot of times, if you're introverted or you get your energy from not being by yourself, but just not being around crowds of people or face to face, you can wear yourself out a lot quicker. and you can't be effectively communicating. So for me, I love reading tonality, body language. How are you looking at me? Are you absorbing this? Are you understanding this? That's what I love doing. But some people are like, I'd rather just do it behind a keyboard because that's how they're wired, and that's great. And you should embrace that. So I think that's really important to know that in terms of just really just, living your best life, in terms of just doing what you love and what you're passionate about. And you can't really do that if you're not communicating the way that you want to. So.
Yeah. And if we look at the numbers, what's communication in words? What, 7%? Something like that? 7%
yeah, I think like
communication?
80% is like nonverbal or something along those lines.
Well, I think 8% is like, that's the verbal part. And then there's 38%, which is tonality, and the balance is physiology. So think about how much of that is lost when it's just texts, just words, right? It's easy to misinterpret stuff. Whereas at least here, like, you can see like the energy in my face, like you can see like you can hear my tonality. And so it's more important doing that than actually the words, which is like mind-boggling. Like, it's like, it doesn't really matter what you say, as long as you mean it.
I agree.
Yeah, you can read a lot by just the visual part of the communication. Like, and I think part of that is awareness, to your point, Nick, and David, you too, with just knowing how you're coming off or what you're expressing through your body language or through your tone. If I sit back like this and I talk about, hey guys, communication today, this is what we're talking about, versus this, like I love talking about communication. This is what we're talking about today. I love what I do. It's so different. And if I text something like that, there's no way you can understand or see the difference between the two of those things. Yeah. So I think there's something there, and I just love the idea of the back and forth, because your communication changes, or your style changes, or you kind of adjust to each other based on the feedback that you're getting. So Nick, that listening part can help tweak those dials to where maybe you need to adjust your approach based on the feedback that you're getting from what you're saying to that person. Does that resonate with you, David?
Yeah, it does. And one thing I've been trying to practice is this listen. Don't think of a response, or try not to formulate a response before they're done talking, which is way harder than it initially might seem, for me anyways.
Yeah. Well, and because people can feel that too. They can feel you just to wait to stop talking, and then they launch into whatever they're going to say. And there's something that happens with that. There's I'm speaking with another coach with this, it's, I hate using this term, but like a safe space or a safety space to communicate and be yourself. And when you feel that with the other person, where they're just kind of going off into their own stuff, and you're not being heard, or you're not being listened to, that safety goes away. And then you're not really expressing yourself, or just truly saying what you want to say, or communicating what you want to communicate. And that's where the breakdown happens. It's much easier said than done, though. And it's like a practice, right? With anything, it can become better. But, there's also ways to pick up on that visually. Like, I'm looking at Nick right now. He looks like, at least, that he's listening to what I'm saying. Nick, are you listening to me?
What was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a continual practice, and it is difficult only because that we don't do it all the time, or some of us more than others, less than others, whatever. But it's like anything else, anything you do enough of, you're going to get better at. But that's part of the practice of coaching as well. It's listening, and you can not only be there and actually be doing it, but you can show it as well. But it's mirroring. It's repeating back. It's did I get that, or is that right? Is that what you said? Did I hear you correctly? All of those ways are supporting the fact that you're listening to that person, and your outcome is just to hear that person. And it's so powerful, because think about this in business. It's not only are you listening before, to your point, Dave, before just trying to get it out there and cutting people off, but when you do that, you're not even thinking about yourself. So you can be the best possible support and version of you for that other person, because all you're thinking about is the other person. And when you do that, you just give so much more value, and there's no pressure on you. It's just not about you at all. So the irony is that you actually get better by doing that anyway, and it's less pressure. It's mad. But it's kind of counterintuitive from the start. But it's like, look, if I don't have any outcome here, I'm just going to go wherever the natural flow of the communication goes, and I'm just going to listen. take my cues from you, then ultimately I'm going to have more value because I'm going to really hear you.
I think that goes to the safe space a little bit, Nick. Like if I want you to think that I'm smart or can provide value or whatever, I want to, there's almost like a desire to impress. And like I have to show off or say a certain thing that's going to wow you. But to your point, the way to do that is to meet you on your level where you're at and just kind of run with your communication style or whatever words that you're saying. Because if people are not heard, there's no chance of that value being delivered anyway, even if I have the best ideas in my head that I want to say when you stop talking. So I think that's an interesting dynamic with, and David, I hope I can bring up this example right before we hit the record. You said, you have a project coming up, and I'm wondering how this applies to like a group setting. And I think there's something there with like keeping it simple. I wrote down clear and simple when you're speaking to a big group. But if you want to effectively communicate to a large number of people, like what's the strategy there? How do you, like for the most part, you're going to be one of the only ones talking until you get feedback or ask questions from the group. But how do you most effectively communicate with a group then?
Yeah, to me, it's finding out what's really most important into that group, because obviously you have a group, usually there's one goal, there's a reason why they're there. It's like, why are they really here? And for example, they might be there to like support your charity or maybe support you or whatever you're doing. But what can I call it heartstrings. How do I get the heartstrings, and how do you really communicate is getting the heartstrings. And I want to say something off what you two said with a safe place is one thing I've really learned is matching their energy or matching them. So for me, if I'm coming in like really over excited, like, you ever meet somebody before, it's kind of like a grin, like not grin, but it's just like a chill. And all of a sudden there's like, hey man, how you doing? It's like, whoa, that's not, yeah, right. Yeah. It's like, I've tried to, like, if I talk to someone that's more relaxed, more reserved, I'll try to match that energy. Like, hey, I can be reserved for a half hour while I talk to you. I can't do that 24/7, but I can match you for that moment. And to me, I found out that communicates better. It gets them more comfortable with me. But anyways, to answer your question, a group of people, to me, it's like what's important to them. And a lot of times when I would speak to colleges or groups of people or entrepreneurial conferences, I always want to talk about what I want to talk about. But I realize often a lot of times what I talk about is not necessarily what they want to hear, what they need to learn. So I've learned to flip-flop that. What do they need to learn? What's important to them? What do they really want to get out of this? And how can I cater that communication to them?
Yeah, and it comes back to, well, why are you there in the first place? Are you there because you're committed to them, for them to get value for their outcome, or are you there because you want to be there and it's just something fun for you? And so that depends as well, which is interesting. But those things you mentioned was like meet people where they are, matching and mirroring, aligning before you redirect. Like it's all rapport building skill. And so it's like, first things first, I need to be on the same page, because if someone's coming at you with a 10 energy, you got to match them with a 10 energy. And then maybe what you'll do is you'll intentionally bring them down to a place where you can use what you need to get to the outcome that's required for both of you. But if you come in at a 2 energy, you've got to come in at a 2 energy as well and meet their pace and be soft. And then you can bring it up with them, because once you're connected, you go together. It's like that physical matching and mirroring as well. It's like if you go to a restaurant and you see another couple sitting over there and you start looking at them, and you sit a certain way with your arms crossed, you look back at them in a minute's time, they'll be sitting with your arms crossed as well. Because we naturally do this as humans, where we connect in all those different levels. And so by just aligning with people, you can bring them along and influence them for wherever they want to go and help them get to that point. So just this whole subject of communication, I think, is like so powerful. It's like intricate to who we are as humans. And when you start attaching it to business, you think about the power that's there, but it's ultimately all underpinned by humans. All right? And if you think about the mind scan, which is a cool tool that we have, is three patterns of thinking: the relator, doer, the thinker. The relator is all about people, and that's where everything always starts. So you could have the best doer, which is like the innovation, the action, and the thinker is about the systemic and the strategy. The best innovation, the best strategy in the world. But if no one's on board to listen to you, it's going to fall on deaf ears. Doesn't matter what you got to say. If people's defense is up, it's going to hit the fence and fall down. It's what we got to come back to every single time. It's like if we're not going anywhere, we've got to hit the reset button and go back to communication. I just find it so cool. Aren't people great?
Yeah. I love what you said about Like it's intricate to who we are as humans. Like that's what we if we didn't have communication, like think if we just cut off all communication, visual, verbal, whatever, like there's nothing that we could make work. So like, it's the whole basis, the building block of connectivity, of accomplishment, of success, of everything. And that's why it's so important to communicate effectively. And I think so many people, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I just feel like there's so much of an opportunity to work on your communication style, if nothing else, to just be more aware of where the other person is when you're communicating and meet them at their level.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, David? What are you thinking?
I mean, yeah, it's a lot. It's actually, it's so funny. It's a lot to think about, right? And it's just like wrapping your head around so much everything you're just saying. I don't have a clear thought right now, to be honest with you. I'm just absorbing it all.
No, it's cool, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, why don't more people do that? Is there an unconscious focus to not have the level of communication that we want?
Yeah. And I think to me, it comes down to like security and identity, right? Like, for example, we know that, often we just talk because we just want to hear ourselves talk, or maybe we know someone that does that, right? I don't know. But for me, it's just like, I'm a way better, listener when I'm in a better state of mind of who I am and secure in who I am, right? It's really kind of like you guys mentioned before. Sometimes we talk to impress, right? But if I don't feel the need to impress somebody because I'm secure in who I am already, you know what I mean? I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to, I can just listen to you because I'm secure in who I am, or I just care about you so much, right? It's like those that are love, those are, like, you usually give what you have and what your heart is full of. So, because you can only give you can only give what you don't have for so long. Right. So, anyways, that's where my thoughts are going. It's really, well, I wish I'd become a better listener. Well, maybe there's something you got to work on internally, because it sounds like you don't want to hear anybody. So it's tough, right? It's tough to give what you don't feel.
I love that. That'd be a good segue into starting to come away with our takeaways. So I'm going to put you on the spot, David. Can you repeat that again? You can only give away so much of what you don't have. Is that what you said? I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's tough to give something that you don't have, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's really tough to love someone if you don't actually feel loved. It's really hard. I mean, you can do it when things are going right, but as soon as something doesn't go right, or something's distracts you, or something's going wrong, it's really tough to love somebody, because you're like, it's like a roller coaster, right? And so for me, it's like having my identity of who I am and who gets to say what I am. I think to me that's a huge thing for me. So because if I just go by how today's going, all of a sudden somebody cuts me off in traffic, all of a sudden a business deal falls short, or all of a sudden someone, whatever, someone just treats you horribly because they're having a bad day. It's really tough to give that when you're just going by your environment, what gives you in that moment. And that's a roller coaster I wanted to get off a long time ago. Yeah. You can't give what you don't have, and hurt people. So that's, and you can't communicate well if you're always walking around wounded or hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, there's such a duality to that as well. So I love it. Like, you can't give what you don't have, and it's so if you're not willing to work on yourself to create more of you, then you can't give it to someone else because it's not there in the first place. So the duality of a selfish act versus a selfless act. It's like, I want to give, create more, be more, become more, give back. But in actual fact, the way to do that is to focus on yourself, which is in some respects, and then it's like, focus on yourself so you can have that certainty, to your point, Dave. And then when you're actually in the moment, it's all about the other person. So it's like everything, there's two sides to it. So for me, it's like, it's really, first things first, it has to be around communication. I think the quality of your relationships is the quality of your communication. Like, that's it. Like, or the quality of the communication is the quality of your relationships, or even the quality of your life. Because if that's at a low level, then just by default, nothing else can be at a high level, because, Josh, to your point, everything starts with communication.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Yeah, I think, so my takeaway, I'm going to try to develop this, something we haven't mentioned yet. Just going to, let's see if we can come up with this. I think it's just about letting the conversation flow where it needs to flow. And I'm trying to think of a way. So David was talking about like feeling secure and comfortable in your own skin. Is there a way for me to help create that just in the beginning of the conversation? So yes, he might feel comfortable in his own skin, but like, is there a way for me to, by the things that I'm saying or the things that I'm doing, to show that it's okay to express that in the conversation. And it might be as simple as just asking further questions about what he's saying, instead of me, jumping into what I want to or need to say. Just asking, like, what else? Okay, well, what about that? What about that? And it's like getting him. Sometimes stuff comes out there that he maybe meant to say, but he's got so much to say that you want to be respectful of the time that you're taking in the conversation. So just giving that space, I think that's the takeaways. Allow that space for communication to really flourish, and sometimes that takes a couple attempts.
So if I'm hearing that correctly, it's be very intentional at the start of the conversation to provide that safe space. So that's first things first. It's nothing else until you can show as much as possible to that other person that you're there to listen, to create the safe space.
It's right, and it comes down to doing less. So like that check mark is like, well, this is my initial knee-jerk reaction of what I want to do. Don't do that. Do less. It's like what's that movie? Forgetting Sarah Marshall. You guys ever seen that?
Yeah.
Where he's taking surfing lessons, and they're in the sand, and he's on the surfboard, and he like goes to stand up. He's like, no, you gotta do less. You gotta do less, and he ends up like not standing up at all. But that's what I'm thinking of. Like, do less. Just do less activity, because that will allow the conversation to flow and go where it needs to go.
Yeah, and I think often our next step isn't to add something or do something. A lot of times it's to remove something to create more space for something better. So I don't know about you, but when we add, I need to do this, and you do this, our lives are full. And a lot of times you look at your to-do list for the day and you're like, yeah, that's not getting done, if we're being realistic. So I think the hardest part is like, people are like, I gotta do better in this. I gotta do better in that. I gotta do better in that. It's like, maybe you just need to create more space. And a lot of times their next step is just to remove something. It could be an apathetic friendship. It could be something that's pulling you back, something that's bringing you down, something that it could be just something that just reminds you of something that's not, there's a million ways to turn that in, to what that is. But for me, often I'm always in a process of, if I really want to have become who I'm meant to be, I have to remove things that just aren't aligned with that, so I can create space for more of that stuff that is to help me become the man I was meant to be. So anyways, that's my thoughts.
Beautiful.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's great. Nick, anything else you can think of that you want to tie this in a bow?
No, I want to end on that. A beautiful commentary from David there. Appreciate that. It was great.
Yeah, me too. I think that's a good ending point. Well, thank you, David, for joining us. We'll see you guys next week on another episode of Truth Seekers.